Designating cartel members as terrorists is still an objective for some members of government in the United States. It always amazes me, like only a week ago from making this video, we just seem to forget that we almost designated all these cartel members terrorists, and we almost sent the US military into Mexico. The Mexico president got mad at us. Here's what's going on. Now, stick with me here, because the Mexican president told the United States that you need to give more hugs to their families, cartel members are in jail, the United States still wants to designate cartel members as terrorists. Please let me break this all down for you. Now, as many are aware, there were Americans who went into Mexico, 4 of them, for cosmetic surgery. 2 of them were taken out by the cartel, the other 2 were kidnapped, and it got really bad. In fact, even a Mexican woman was taken out as well by the cartel, but that was on accident. Now, out of nowhere, the Gulf Cartel, the Scorpion faction, they turned over 5 of their own for acting out in a way they weren't supposed to. Essentially, the cartel made a public apology, and you sort of got to give them credit for that. In fact, the cartel in their apology letter even apologized in the area where this little operation or mishap happened. Anyway, the cartel turned over their own, and now these guys are in prison. Now, one of the main questions or concerns was like, why did the cartel apologize if they knew this was a mistake? Why did those members act out on their own? And the general consensus by experts, aka everywhere that I've read, everyone is saying that it was an accident, and the cartel thought that the Americans were a rival faction or a rival gang. And that's why the Mexican government took that apology letter as evidence enough, the fact that they're all tied up. We have a letter from the actual cartel, and that's why they threw him in jail. Now, stick with me, because I know we're quick to forget. There was a lot of hype behind this story, and the US seemed pretty determined to call cartel members terrorists. It sort of fizzled away, but now it's back. We'll get to that soon. Now, we have to understand, before the cartel actually tied up their own, gave them to the public, the United States was like, that's it, we are designating cartel members terrorists, and then that's why a lot of people speculate the cartel came out and apologized. But the one person who really seemed to get upset about this was actually the Mexican president, and I spoke a little bit about this, but the Mexican president also wanted to continue into the American lifestyle and where things go wrong. The Mexican president straight up said, you guys are not operating in Mexico. Whether or not you want to call the cartel terrorists, you're not operating in Mexico, so do whatever you want. But then he said this. The Mexican president said, US families were to blame for the fentanyl overdose crisis because they don't hug their kids enough. And he said, there's a lack of disintegration of families. There's a lot of individualism. There is a lack of love, of brotherhood, of hugs and embraces. That is why the US should be deciding funds to address this cause. Now, to sort of bring this all together, one of the main issues the United States had with the cartel is that the fentanyl trade is actually what they're deeming as terroristic acts. Like, you're killing Americans due to your drug trading. Now, the cartel have not given any more public statements. In fact, the cartel, they don't have like a spokesman. And this was sort of a more rare case of where you have a public letter and you sort of get an insight to how the cartel operates. I forgot to mention, the Mexican president had also stated the reason why in Mexico they don't have fentanyl overdoses or a drug crisis like in the United States is because family has very close family values to one another. But as I dug into this statement and I actually looked up the reason why cartel members would rather sell product to the United States, it's because they make more money from US citizens than they would from Mexican citizens. Now, leaving Mexico over into the United States, there was a lot of hype behind designating cartel members terrorists, especially from Senator Graham. And like a lot of American policies, things just like fizzle out, especially when there's a lot of media hype and emotionalism. We have to remember that now Putin stepped into Ukraine, there was a drone that crashed into the Black Sea, so of course a lot of people are going to forget what happened in Mexico. And the initial bill to designate terrorists by Senator Graham, I just can't find anything on the internet. Like, the time I'm making this video, the only thing I can find is a week ago there was a press conference, and then 2 weeks ago the bill was introduced, so I can't find anything. I don't know why it fizzled out, but it's coming back into circulation. So, introducing Chip Roy. I've never heard of Chip Roy, but he's within the House of Representatives, and he wants to introduce a new bill designating cartel members as terrorists. Now, let me give you a comprehensive breakdown of what this bill would do. I'm going to butcher some of these names. You can laugh at me in the comments. Here we go. The bill would formally designate the Gulf Cartel, Cartel de Noreste, Cartel de Sinaloa, Cartel de Jalisco, Nuevo Generacion as foreign terrorist organizations. I'm sorry, my middle school Spanish teacher is going to hate me, but let me keep going. The recent kidnapping of 4 American citizens clearly illustrates the fact that cartels are no longer just drug-running gangs. They are bold enough to kidnap and kill foreign nationals in broad daylight. There is no limit to the inhumane methods they will use to achieve their ultimate and profiting off of human suffering. Now, here's a really interesting fact about the bill. I've been saying for a while, when you designate a group terrorist, you actually open up the doors for government agencies to start to collab together, to give more money where money is needed, for organizations to get these terrorists. Let me show you what I mean. It's long past time to designate these cartels as terrorists. They are and give U.S. authorities the tools needed to take them down. That's why I started pushing the Trump administration for designations during my first few months in Congress, why I introduced this legislation last Congress, and why I'm introducing it again. And again, the wording in that specific statement, giving authorities the tools needed. Once you designate a group terrorist, it's by all means to take out those terrorist groups. But I'm sure all of you are thinking it, what is the point of this bill if the Mexican president and government's already saying, we don't want you in our country, what don't you get? Now, here's one of the biggest issues with the United States, especially with these specific policies with really big implications. I am a United States citizen who comes from the mountains of upstate New York. I have no idea what it's like to grow up in a border town. The other issue with this specific bill, you actually have a lot of people who are in favor with making cartel members terrorists, but you have quite a lot of people who are not in favor of making cartel members terrorists. I would even go as far to argue the most important people who would have to make cartel members terrorists for any of this to matter would be the Mexican government. And again, they are not wanting to do that. Don't forget, the Mexican government is literally telling the US government, how about you deal with your families, tell everyone to hug one another, and we're dealing with our families. So where do we go from here? Well, I'm going to be completely honest. I'm actually on the side of not making cartel members terrorists. Main reason being, I don't think anyone is prepared to deal with that side of the cartel. You see, the cartel is weird because there's respect and no respect for them. Because we know what they're trying to do. If anything, they would love to avoid any chaos or any physical abuse of their own people. They're just trying to get product into the United States. The issue is that product happens to be deadly. And from a U.S. perspective and a historic perspective, the United States is known to get into these situations where they designate a group as a bad group of people. Then we put ourselves in a situation that has no end goal. We also need to be aware what's going on the Mexican border, especially with U.S. military members. When you start to get them involved in the cartel provoking the U.S. military, that's where things can go downhill. Because for the most part overall, the dispute over there is actually not that bad between the cartel and the military. There's not like a gunfight every day like we're back in Afghanistan. And the thing is, the cartel could play extremely dirty if they want to, because they know the morale is so bad on the Mexican border. Why would we put our soldiers in that position to now all of a sudden you're facing terrorists on the border? So that's my opinion. Leave your comments and opinion down below. When you talk about the cartel, you need to be careful because I don't think it's so black and white, especially the fact that they gave an apology letter, they gave up their own people. It doesn't look like they want to incite too much violence, but they're not afraid to do it. Again, the cartel is a very unique entity within the Mexican culture. Some people support them, some people don't. People in the United States are affected by them because of the fentanyl trade. None of this is black and white. But I firmly stand on the side that if we designate them as terrorists, I think things can ramp up really quick, and I don't know if the United States is prepared for that. And I personally hate to see violence. I hate to see people get affected by drugs, but this is the situation we're in.